Steve Nolan, Major Steve Nolan, United States Air Force, Major retired, former career mental health officer, Army and Air Force, served my country for 30 years, had a military career, and then I ran a PTSD clinic for the VA for 5 years after I retired from the military. I want to talk about white supremacy, racism, Charlottesville, and just the other night during the presidential debate, the president being asked once again about white supremacy, and even specifically about a particular group called Proud Boys, and his inability to separate himself from that movement. Most people know that what was such an abomination about Charlottesville was that the president said there were fine people on both sides. It should have been a no-brainer, an easy thing for a president of the United States to talk about what happened in Charlottesville. Number one, there was a young woman, Heather Heyer, who was killed there, run over by a white supremacist. That should have made his comments really easy. Knowledge of World War II and the Holocaust should have made it easy, as we saw images of neo-Nazis with swastikas and torches marching down an American city street, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Pretty simple stuff. But one thing people missed out on, and this is one of the things that I've written about in my book, American Carnage, An Officer's Duty to Warn, is even those who found it very offensive, most people don't realize what an abdication of responsibility it is on the part of the president, because the president is always commander-in-chief at the same time he's president. And to be in the KKK, to be a neo-Nazi, to be a white supremacist is a disqualifier from military service. Their beliefs are unconstitutional. In fact, their very manifestos have to do with violating the equal rights and constitutional rights of other American citizens. So none of them could ever get past a recruiter, and yet the commander-in-chief of all the military is unaware that these people would be disqualified from military service. And so there was no excuse for calling them fine people. Just as we saw the other night, where he was asked in the presidential debate to denounce white supremacy, and he was asked about this one particular group called Proud Boys, and rather than denounce them, he actually told them to stand by, almost like a private army of his that's on hold to do his bidding. Now again, I'm not into politics. My area of expertise is mental health. And so, once again, if I had any soldier, sailor, Marine, airman who held these beliefs and somehow had made it through a recruiter and basic and all that, and then we found out they were white supremacists, they are going to be discharged. If in the interview we find out that they like these views, they're proud of these views, they recruit for these organizations, then we're most likely finding character pathology, what we call character pathology, which is not just un-American beliefs, but a particular mental disorder where they cannot absorb the principles and agree with the principles that we found our society on, like the Ten Commandments, like the rule of law, like just simply right from wrong. In fact, anyone can look up the criteria and just Google in what we call the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and you could look up narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder and compare all those traits with the President of the United States. But I'll give you a cheat sheet, a real shortcut. These people, they lack sympathy, they lack empathy, they're pathological liars, and they can't figure right from wrong. And that's why we disqualify them. Imagine just pathological lying alone would get you kicked out of the military. In fact, it would get you discharged from almost any job. You're not allowed to lie to your boss or your subordinates. So you have an individual that doesn't have sympathy, empathy, lies, and cannot distinguish right from wrong, or doesn't care, doesn't choose one right over wrong. We can't afford to put them into a combat zone. They are the ones that are going to violate the Geneva Conventions. And our own president meets all this criteria. And if you notice many of his quotes, one of his quotes is that the Geneva Conventions tie the hands of our military. He pardoned a war criminal. And he didn't just pardon him. He returned his Navy SEAL Trident. And then he didn't stop with that. He invited him to Mar-a-Lago, his private residence, and hailed this convicted war criminal who stabbed a 14-year-old prisoner in the neck as a great warrior. This destroys the entire system. I'll juxtapose this with a personal story from my family. My mother was a World War II combat nurse. She was in all 5 major battles, landed in Normandy. She was a heavy casualty field hospital nurse. She treated survivors of the massacre at Gardelegen and survivors of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Occasionally, she had to reassure her Nazi patients that her hypodermic needles did not contain poison. This doesn't represent the weakness of America. This represents the greatness of America. Now, by the president pardoning a war criminal, he sent a message to the entire military and to his chain of command that his original statements were true, that he does believe that Geneva Conventions tie the hands of our military. But the Geneva Conventions are what keep our soldiers from being Nazis. And again, tie this into Charlottesville, where there are fine people on both sides, including those neo-Nazis. There's a thread, a consistent thread with the president that we only find with this particular pathology, the personality disorder, or I like the old term, character disorder pathology, which makes them unfit for military service if they were a lower rank, unfit for command in his case.